Emily Grant walked across the tarmac as the morning sun glanced off fighter jet canopies. Her flight suit was worn at the edges, her boots dull from years of storms, not parades. Nearby, a group of pilots laughed too loudly, their banter bouncing off hangar walls like locker room noise in the wrong place. Someone whistled when she passed and nudged a buddy. She didn't turn. They were all younger, flashier, and made for the cover of magazines. She just flew straight into danger and brought back numbers that saved lives. Inside the prep bay, her seat was already rigged. Zip-tied to the headrest was a bright orange poncho. Across the back, scrawled in thick black Sharpie, it read, "Storm Queen." Underneath, a post-it note fluttered in the breeze. "Don't forget your crown." Emily didn't react. She tucked her checklist under one arm, climbed into her aircraft, and sat down on the rustling plastic. The P-3 Orion groaned beneath her, old and tested, just like her. Far above the Gulf Coast, hours later, the same voices that mocked her were now on the radio. Their jets flanked her wounded aircraft like sentinels in a final salute. Her engines were dying, her hull was bleeding, but she had made it through the heart of a Category 5 monster, and lived. Captain Blake's voice crackled through the static. "Storm Chaser, we're with you all the way home." She didn't smile. She adjusted the yoke with both hands steady, and they flew on together, not a joke anymore, but a legend in motion. Part 1. Emily Grant, the Quiet Force. At 38, Emily Grant had the kind of face people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her. She liked it that way. Her life wasn't about being seen, but about making sure others could live theirs. Before she ever flew into storms, she taught 8th grade science in a small Florida town. Her classroom was lined with faded posters of planets and hurricane diagrams, taped corners curling with time. The kids called her Miss G and loved how she could explain pressure systems with paper cups and a box fan. Then came the flood. Her little sister Rachel had been alone in their family's home when the water came faster than anyone expected. The forecasts had said there was time. There wasn't. That night rewrote Emily's life. She left the classroom, enrolled in flight school, and set her sights on the skies that had taken her sister. She didn't want another child left waiting for a warning that never came. When she joined NOAA as a weather pilot, most of her male peers raised eyebrows. She didn't fly fast jets. She didn't do barrel rolls or call signs, but she stayed up there longer than any of them. Emily flew the P-3 Orion. It was old, heavy, slow. Like her, it was built for endurance, not applause. Together, they cut through hurricane bands while the younger guys turned back. On the ground, she blended in with maintenance crews more than officers. Her flight suit had grease on the knees, her boots were scuffed at the heels. When she spoke in meetings, her voice was soft, but always carried facts. Still, the fighter pilots rarely listened. They nodded, smirked, and shifted focus back to their storm intercept routes. They called her Weather Lady or Forecast Mom. Behind her back, though, she never gave them reason to mock her. Emily didn't fight back with words. She let her work speak. Each mission she flew brought back numbers that turned into decisions, evacuations, lives saved, and she never asked for credit. Her crew knew the truth. The ones who flew with her, who saw how she read the clouds like old friends, they trusted her instincts more than satellite feeds. She could feel when the air was about to turn. No medals hung in her quarters, no pictures on her desk, just one framed snapshot of Rachel with a popsicle in her hand, barefoot on a sunny porch. That was the forecast Emily chased every time she flew, a world where storms came and left, but everyone had time to get out. Quiet, steady, unshakable. That was Emily Grant, not built for attention, but built to hold the line when it mattered most. Part 2. The storm is coming. Misjudged at the base. The briefing room at Biloxi Air Base was packed, the kind of full where body heat turned stale air into something close to soup. Charts lined the walls and the projector flickered with updated satellite images of Hurricane Harold, now classified as a Category 4. Pilots leaned back in their chairs, trading cocky grins and elbow nudges like it was a pregame huddle. Colonel Myers pointed at the map, voice booming. Thunderhawk Squadron will lead the intercept. Lightning Strike will handle recon at 15,000 feet. The room buzzed like it always did before action, full of swagger and caffeine. Emily sat near the back, her flight manual open on her lap notes, scribbled in red ink from the night before. She had seen the heat anomalies in the satellite feed. The storm was strengthening faster than models predicted. She raised her hand and spoke quiet, but direct. The temperature gradient in the lower band suggests we're looking at early signs of rapid intensification. Colonel Myers didn't even look her way. That's nice, Captain Grant. Just fly the grid and leave the heavy thinking to the strike teams. Laughter rippled across the room. One pilot muttered babysitter flight, and his buddy nearly choked on his coffee. Emily didn't argue. She never did. Arguing only made it worse. As the meeting broke up, pilots filed out with swagger in their boots. Fighter jets always got the prime slots, the press coverage, the respect. Weather flights, just background noise. At the hangar, her team was already prepping the Orion. Marcus glanced up from the engine readouts and gave her a tight-lipped nod. They'd heard. They always heard. Emily pulled herself into the cockpit, but her breath caught. Tied to her seat was a bright orange poncho zip-tied in place, crinkling in the breeze from the hangar fans. Across the back, scrawled in black marker, were the words, "Storm Queen." A note hung just below it. "Don't forget your crown." Marcus moved to cut it loose, but she raised a hand. "Leave it." She slid into her seat, the plastic loud beneath her, and adjusted her harness like it was any other day. She didn't flinch. If they wanted her to break, they'd have to try harder. Outside, fighter jets roared to life, their pilots striding across the tarmac like rock stars. Emily's plane sat in their long shadows, old and unremarkable, but it had flown through storms that would twist those F-18s into metal scraps. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Speed and noise on one side, patience and purpose on the other, but only one of them was about to fly into the belly of a storm and bring back the truth. Emily didn't need a runway salute. She needed the data to be right. As she powered up the engines, she could see the storm already building on the radar. Hurricane Harold was coming, and something in the air told her it wasn't going to play by the rules. Neither would she. Part 3. Into the Storm. Defiance and Determination. Sub. Part 3.1. Breaking the Rules. Her choice to fly in. 3 hours into the flight, the first warning came over the radio. Lightning strike was turning back. Severe turbulence. Conditions too dangerous at 15,000 feet. The voice on the comm was tight shaken, not the same one that had joked during briefing. Emily looked at Marcus, then at the storm wall ahead. The clouds weren't just building. They were alive. She scanned the instruments again, double-checking the satellite uplink, the temperature shifts, the rotation pattern. Harold wasn't behaving. He was accelerating. The tower called next. "All aircraft. Return to base immediately. Storm is intensifying to Category 5. She reached for the mic but paused. Her eyes went to the photo taped above the altimeter. Rachel, 8 years old, wet hair wrapped in a towel, smiling after a swim. It was the last summer they had before the flood. Emily keyed in. Storm chaser experiencing radio interference. Continuing mission. Marcus stared at her, his hands frozen on the panel. Emily didn't flinch. If they turned back now, emergency managers would be flying blind. That's how Rachel died. They waited too long. Marcus broke the silence first. "You just disobeyed a direct order." She nodded. "Only if we don't come back." His jaw tightened. Then he went back to his readings without another word. From the back of the plane, Dana's voice came over the intercom. Hydraulics stable. Engines running hot but within tolerance. Her tone said she'd heard everything and was still on board. That was her answer. Maya leaned toward her screen, frowning. Wind shear patterns are off model. Pressure gradients are shifting fast. If we stay, we could map it. Predict storm surge with real numbers. She glanced at Emily, then nodded once. "I'm in." Nathan dropped into his seat and buckled tight. "My kids are in New Orleans. If this data gets them out in time, I'll take the risk." He didn't wait for approval, just got to work. Jake was the last. He had been quiet, watching, calculating. "My grandfather died in Hurricane Camille. Surge hit early. No one expected it." He pulled his nav charts onto his lap. "Let's get it right this time." Emily looked around. No speeches, no bravado, just quiet agreement from people who had chosen purpose over comfort. She felt a knot form deep in her chest. Not fear, not pressure, just a weight that came with knowing they all understood the stakes. Outside, the clouds loomed like mountains of steel wool. Lightning spidered through their bellies, the kind of sky that swallows planes whole. Emily adjusted their course. They were going in deeper. Every flight before this had been about prediction. This one was about proof, about knowing exactly when the water would rise and how high it would go, about saving the people who had no idea how close they already were to disaster. As the plane climbed toward the outer bands, turbulence hit like a shove. Papers flew. The fuselage groaned, but no one moved to turn back. They were past the point of orders, past the fear of consequences. Emily wasn't flying for rank or recognition. She was flying for a little girl in a photo, and for every family still sleeping along the coast, trusting that someone out there would tell them the truth in time. Subpart 3.10. Into the eye, the flight through chaos. The first hit came like a punch to the gut. The P-3 Orion dropped suddenly like something had yanked it out of the sky. Loose binders flew past Emily's head. Nathan grabbed a rail and held on as the whole aircraft shuddered. Rain pounded the windshield so hard it sounded like 1,000 hammers. The wipers were useless. The world outside had turned a thick, churning gray that swallowed everything. Emily kept her hands on the yoke, steady and firm. The turbulence wasn't just rough, it was violent. The plane twisted like a bird caught in a wind tunnel. Alarms blared as systems strained to keep up. She worked the trim, nudging the aircraft into a rhythm that felt almost like breathing with the storm. Marcus yelled from the side panel. "Pressure's dropping fast. This isn't Category 4 anymore." Emily nodded without answering. She could feel it in the stick in the way the Orion jerked and rolled. Harold had grown teeth. Maya shouted over the roar. "Readings are unstable. Instruments are maxing out. But we're logging everything." Emily adjusted their heading eyes on the radar. Lightning lit the sky in white bursts, each one closer than the last. Jake called out their distance to the eye wall. 12 miles and closing. Emily exhaled slowly and focused. The storm wasn't something to fight. It was something to ride through like a current underwater. If she resisted, the plane would break apart. Dana came in from the rear. Engine temps holding. Vibration in engine 3. Nothing critical. Yet. Another drop hit them like a trapdoor opening beneath their feet. The crew went weightless for half a breath. Then the Orion slammed back into the air with a metallic groan. Emily kept her grip light. Let the plane move. Don't force it. The control panel blinked like a warning light factory, but her focus never drifted. Through the windshield, the chaos thickened. Rain, lightning, cloud walls that looked solid. Maya braced against her console. "Wind speeds are beyond our forecast model. We're getting numbers no one's ever recorded." Emily banked gently. They were approaching the final curtain. The eye wall towered ahead like a vertical sea. Inside, it felt like the storm was trying to rip them apart. G-forces pulled them sideways. The plane rolled 30 degrees, then 40. Emily corrected with fingers like wire. Jake shouted altitude. They were losing it. Fast. Marcus gritted his teeth. Backup systems are holding, but the hydraulics are stressed. Emily glanced at the poncho still bunched beneath her. Storm Queen. The plastic crinkled under pressure as if it knew where they were headed. Then, just as fast as it began, the turbulence stopped. The clouds opened. A ring of eerie stillness surrounded them. Sunlight poured through the top of the eye like something holy. And below, the ocean turned in perfect spirals. The crew went silent. Only the hum of the engines and the quiet beeping of instruments filled the space. Emily didn't speak. She just leveled the wings and flew. Maya's hands moved fast. We're getting full atmospheric structure. Temperature layers, wind shear profiles. This is gold. Jake recalibrated their position. We're centered, holding at 8,000 feet. The readings are clean. For a few minutes it felt unreal, like they were inside a cathedral of sky. Light flickered off the fuselage, and for the first time all day, Emily allowed herself a breath that didn't feel borrowed. But even as they circled, she saw it. The eye was shrinking. Fast. Pressure's falling, Maya warned. This storm isn't done. It's still growing. Emily adjusted the trim. They had minutes before the calm collapsed in on itself. She plotted their exit, aiming for the quadrant with the weakest convection, the easiest path out. But the data wasn't finished. "How long do you need?" she asked. Maya scanned her charts. 2 more laps. 3 if we can hold. Emily nodded once. Then we stay. The calm wouldn't last, but they had come this far. And the numbers they carried could change the way entire cities prepared for storms like Harold. They were inside the eye of a monster. But for now, the monster was listening. Part 4. Twist, rescue by the ones who mocked her. They were 30 miles from the coast when Engine 2 started choking. Dana's voice came through tight. It's losing power. Vibration is off the charts. They had already lost one. Now another was about to give up. Altitude was slipping. Airspeed too. Emily pulled every ounce of lift from what little they had left. Jake's calculations were grim. We're not going to reach the runway. They all knew what that meant. Ditching in the Gulf with no engines, hoping rescue was already en route. Then the comm crackled. A new voice came through the static. Storm Chaser, this is Lightning Strike Lead. Is that you, Emily? For a second, no one said anything. Then Marcus grabbed the mic and answered. She's here. We're here. Barely. The voice came again, louder now with a stunned edge. You actually went through it. You went into the eye. Emily kept her hands steady. They weren't out yet. But they weren't alone anymore. Jets appeared in formation, breaking through the upper clouds like ghosts. Sleek. Fast. Deadly. The same ones that had laughed as they geared up. Now they flanked the limping Orion with surgical precision. Captain Blake's voice cut through again. Storm Chaser, we've got you. Escort all the way in. There was no mockery, no teasing, only disbelief laced with admiration. Emily didn't smile. She just nodded and adjusted pitch. Maya whispered almost to herself. The same people who laughed at us are flying cover. Nathan glanced out the window, eyes wide. I never thought I'd be glad to see that guy. Blake chimed in one more time. Emily, I don't know if you're the craziest pilot I've ever met or the best. Maybe both. It wasn't a compliment. It was a confession. A kind of apology wrapped in awe. The air around them felt different. The dynamic had shifted. For the first time since they took off, Emily allowed a breath to fill her chest. Not because they were safe, but because the story had changed. The woman in the plastic poncho wasn't the joke anymore. She was the one who stayed in the storm when no one else would. The Orion kept losing altitude, but it was losing it with dignity, surrounded by fighter jets like a queen guarded by her knights. They didn't say much, just held formation and flew. Emily didn't look back. She didn't have to. The vindication wasn't in their words. It was in their silence, in the way they stayed close, in the way their planes dipped slightly to mirror hers, matching every shaky beat of her damaged bird. They were still in the sky, still running on borrowed power, but the loneliest part of the flight was over. She wasn't flying alone anymore. Part 5. Landing with a Legacy. The data that saved thousands. Engine 1 coughed once, then died. The sudden silence inside the cockpit was deafening. Emily didn't hesitate. She reached for the switch that dumped their remaining fuel. Thousands of pounds flowed out of the tanks in seconds. The aircraft lurched lighter, now gliding faster. Maya looked up from her station, eyes wide with disbelief. That gave us 2 more miles. Jake recalculated their descent. We might just make it to the edge of the runway. But everything had to hold. No gusts, no surprises, no last-minute failures. Emily kept her hands steady, her voice calm as she called in a mayday. Engines out. Final descent. Rescue crews were already scrambling on the ground. They had cleared the airstrip. Everyone knew this was going to be close. Maya kept working. I've got 80% of the storm data uploaded. I need 2 more minutes for the rest. Emily nodded. You've got them. Just hold on. The P-3 glided through choppy air like a wounded bird. The jet escort stayed tight, one on each wing. No one said a word on the radio. They just flew with her. Jake called out altitude like a countdown. 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. Maya's fingers flew across her console. Upload at 95%. The runway lights appeared ahead, a shimmering path carved through the storm haze. Emily angled toward them, hands guiding the controls like a pianist with broken keys. Maya gave the final shout. Upload complete. We got everything. No one cheered. They didn't have the breath for it. Emily reached down and extended the landing gear manually. The sound was rough metallic, but the wheels locked in place. Marcus whispered from beside her. You're out of miracles. Emily didn't answer. She was too focused. The plane dropped lower. Wind pulled at it like it wanted one last shot. The wheels kissed the concrete with a heavy slam. Smoke rose from the tires. The airframe groaned but didn't break. Emily worked the brakes like a surgeon. No sudden pressure, just controlled resistance. The Orion rolled slower and slower until it finally stopped just past the halfway mark. The crew sat frozen. Then Dana let out a shaky breath. "We're down." Emergency trucks surrounded them within seconds. Ground crews rushed in, but no one moved yet. Emily stared ahead for a beat longer. Then she unbuckled. She reached for the orange poncho tied to her seat. It had survived everything. The words, "Storm Queen," were still visible, smudged from moisture and heat. She folded it carefully, tucking it into her flight bag, without a word. Outside rescue teams opened the hatch. Light flooded in bright and unreal. One by one the crew stepped out, grease-streaked, exhausted, whole. Applause broke out somewhere in the crowd. Pilots, technicians, commanders, people who had doubted them, people who had watched their flight path and held their breath. Colonel Myers was there. Jaw set, tight eyes narrowed not in anger but disbelief. He didn't speak, just watched as Emily stepped onto the tarmac. A representative from FEMA was already on the phone. Maya stood nearby, tablet still in hand. Her voice shook as she relayed the message. "They're changing the evacuation zones. Immediately. Based on our data." Emily looked past the crowd, past the noise, and toward the horizon where the storm still spun. Harold hadn't landed yet. But because of them, cities were emptying. Roads were full. Shelters were opening early. Marcus stepped beside her. "You think it was worth it?" Emily nodded once. Every second. Every risk. They had done more than survive. They had given time. And in a storm, time was everything. Jake showed her a live update from the National Hurricane Center. The models had already shifted. Warnings went out 6 hours earlier than planned. The surge zone was 30 miles farther inland than predicted. Lives would be saved. Whole towns might be spared, because a crew no one expected anything from stayed in the eye when others turned back. Emily didn't want a medal. She didn't need a speech. She only needed to know that somewhere a girl like Rachel would have more time. That was the only recognition she would ever want. And it was already enough. 3 days later, Emily sat alone in the operations center, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. The big screen in front of her showed satellite images of Hurricane Harold's path. Below the swirling cloud mass, a crawl of news headlines ran steadily across the bottom. Storm surge hits. Predicted zone. Mandatory evac orders. Credited with saving thousands. FEMA confirms record accuracy. Towns that should have been underwater had emptied in time. Shelters were full. Highways were jammed before the first winds ever hit. The door opened behind her. Colonel Myers stepped in his cap tucked under one arm. He stood next to her without speaking for a long time. Then he said it quiet and even. "Your flight changed how we do things. We're reevaluating mission priorities. You were right." She didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. She just nodded once and turned back to the screen. That afternoon, Emily walked to the hangar where the Orion sat in silence. Its wings were twisted fuselage patched with tarp, one engine completely removed. It had done everything she asked. And now, it would never fly again. She climbed into the cockpit one last time. The pilot seat was worn smooth. A few instruments were still in place. Her sister's photo was still taped beside the altimeter edges curled from humidity and time. Emily sat there in the quiet. She thought about the storm, the crew, the choice they made together, and about every life they never saw but somehow touched. She reached for her bag and took out the folded poncho. She didn't need it anymore. It had served its purpose. Quietly, she placed it on the seat and stood. On the way back across the tarmac, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize had sent a message. Saw the news. Your sister would be proud. A grateful resident of Baton Rouge. She paused and stared at the screen. Then she smiled. Not big, just enough to feel it. A new aircraft waited near the far end of the runway. P-3 Orion 2. Her crew was already gathering, checking equipment, running pre-flight. They looked up when they saw her. Nodded once. No cheers. Just the kind of respect that comes from going through something, and coming out the other side, still standing. Emily took one last look at the sky. It was clear now. Calm. But it never stayed that way for long. She adjusted her collar, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the next storm.